Welcome to another episode of the APL Spotlight Series, an offshoot of the Maine Angels Positivity and Love show. We just have the coolest guests come back and share more. Sometimes we tape this episode first before they get to their main show appearance, and that's the case today with an amazing figure coming to us from Maine. Lewis Mehl-Madrona, he's been on the scene on a lot of fronts as a doctor, family physician, geriatrics, and other areas, teaching medicine as well, either an associate professor or adjunct professor up in Maine, and probably elsewhere. He's a author, not just the three books that I'm thinking of, Coyote Wisdom, Coyote Healing, Coyote Medicine, which I've read. I love them back in the day. I think it was 10 years ago I read them. I could not find them for today's show, so forgive me. People do need to check these books out. Lewis has had an incredible journey from Stanford Medical School to doing psychiatry as well and other areas. He founded the Coyote Institute, which I think is actually in New Hampshire. But the bottom line is he's all about learning, appreciating, allowing, connecting to the earth, indigenous wisdom, and then giving back to the rest of us. So I'll put it even more simply. It's an honor to have him here. He holds the space for us, and he's got a big heart because he shares what he knows without hesitation. So, Lewis, thank you for joining us on the APL Spotlight Series. Great to meet you. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What would you like to share with us that's the biggest takeaway right at the beginning of the show that people just need to keep in their heart to be able to walk a smoother path?
You know, I was spent some time with a Yaqui healer in Arizona recently just to reconnect. And I think we decided it all comes down to John Lennon, and all you need is love. And the rest is fluff. The rest will follow. And of course love is a broad term, applies to people, animals, planets, water. All kinds of things are worthy of love.
Beautiful. What has surprised you in the last year to 3 years? Because it's really easy being human with thinking, welcome to being human, to settle in on a certain perspective. How have you seen your own perspectives shift? Or what have you been surprised by as the years go by?
Well, I've been surprised that moving into a state of mind in which success is less important and winning prizes doesn't matter so much. And what matters is joy and, altruism and being with other people in a healing way or just having fun in a healing way. And that's a lot different than 50 years ago.
I love it. In Zen, they have that expression, is that so? And there's many little stories or parables that incorporates that in. But let's talk about the difference between happiness and inner calm or just inner peace or your inner authenticity. How do you define all that or handle it any which way you want?
Well, um, I suppose you can be calm and not happy. Elizabeth Bartlett Barrett, I think is her name, writes about emotions. She's a researcher at Boston University who writes about the emotions, and she says there's four emotions. There's aroused positive, aroused negative, not aroused positive, and not aroused negative. And so suppose if you're not aroused positive, you could call that happy, and not aroused positive could be happy too. But I think, people can be calm even when they're aroused negative, can have that inner tranquility. So I suppose happiness is you know, a positive emotion of some kind that feels good. That maybe we want to share it. I know when I'm happy, I usually like to tell someone. So often my wife.
Share with us a little bit about your three books, and it's a trilogy, and they're all wonderful. If you were to only pick one, would you tell people to start at the beginning? And do you mind doing a little bit of an encapsulation about each book?
Not at all. Well, so I would say start at the beginning because I like beginnings. And so the beginning for me was Coyote Medicine. And really, I was trying to make sense of two different worldviews. I hadn't discovered two-eyed seeing yet, so I was struggling with the biomedical, the scientific worldview, and the indigenous spiritual worldview. And the book is really about my figuring out how to do both. And my the teachings that I had on the way, from elders, from patients, from the universe, helping me to be of service, I think, to people, um, and figuring out how to do that. I remember one story from Coyote Medicine that stands out is um, so I was studying with a Cherokee healer in Northern California, and a woman came to me um, with a terrible ankle problem. And I said, "Oh, you should go see my teacher." And she said, "The closest I'm going to get, to Garberville is the Hyatt Regency San Francisco," which is where we were at the time. We were in San Francisco, not at the Hyatt Regency. But so I was a little taken aback, and I called my teacher and I said, "What do I do?" And he said, "Dummy, she's ready to be healed or she wouldn't have come to you." He said, "Just pretend you're me and do what I would do." I said, "Well, what would you do?" And he said, "Well, you'll figure it out, you know." And so I did, and her ankle got better. And that was kind of cool. Um, so I figured out that I could just pretend to be him and things would go all right. They would go okay.
Just a few sentences, if you could, on your other books so people understand what bit of wonder is ahead for them.
Oh, sure, sure. So in Coyote Healing, I wanted to look at the stories that elders tell people in the process of their work with them. And so I was interested in stories about healing. And so both stories that elders told and stories about elders working. I think my favorite story from that book, I called it Melvin Gray Bear Cures a Schizophrenic. And nowadays, of course, we don't say a schizophrenic, we say a person diagnosed with schizophrenia. But I'm hoping to be forgiven for it being a long time ago. And so Melvin was an elder who traveled, and he was called to a small village in British Columbia where his son-in-law came from. And his son-in-law had met Melvin's daughter while stationed at Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota. Melvin was from North Dakota, from Devil's Lake, North Dakota, which actually should be translated Spirit Lake, but the Christians had a different idea of translation. And so there were three young people in the community who committed suicide in a pact, which was very sad. And so Melvin was going to heal the community, do a healing for the community. And part of that was a Uipi ceremony, which is a ceremony in which they tie up the leader and the spirits untie him, which is kind of phenomenal. It's a not to be missed ceremony if you've never gone. And so a bunch of us went with him as roadies because, medicine men need their roadies. And part of our job was to get the basement where the ceremony was going to take place, to get it light proof, because the ceremony has to be done in total darkness. And so we finished our work and we were hanging out at the general store in the middle of town because there wasn't much else in town. Gas station, church, that's about it. And we hear this shotgun outside, kabam, kabam. And we run to the door and there's this guy in camis shouting, I want to be an Indian, I want to be an Indian. And then he'd take his shotgun and go, kabam, kabam. And, the smart thing was to hide, which I did. But Melvin walked right out to him and said, hey, if you want to be an Indian, give me that there shotgun. I don't know what happened to the shotgun, but he gave it to Melvin. And then Melvin yelled at us and said, hey, bring me some tobacco. So we did. And he had this guy offer tobacco to him and say that he wanted to be an Indian. So then he looks at me and he says, you're the damn psychiatrist. Go sit in the back of the truck with him. So I did, and he was quite crazy, technical term. And it was cold, and that wasn't fun. But eventually we went to the ceremony, and it was warmer there, thank God. And Melvin gives him a drum and says, just keep up the beat. And he did, to his credit. And, at the end of our time there, Melvin says to him, look, there's a woman in my community whose husband just died, and she can't take care of her property. So if you want to be an Indian, you can come home with me and take care of her property for her, and any other odd job I find for you to do. And the guy says, okay. And this was before you needed driver's license to cross the border. So we always kept a stack of driver's license, and we looked for the one that fit him the best, and because, one Indian looks like another to the Border Patrol. And so we found a good one. We said, okay, here's your name. Don't forget it. And he went back with Melvin. And so I forgot about him for 4 years. And I ran into him 4 years later. And he said, hey, remember me? And I'm like, and he said, yeah. He said, I'm that guy that used to be a schizophrenic. And he said, and now I'm an Indian. And it was pretty amazing. He'd learned all the songs and helped Melvin with all the ceremonies. And he'd become like a credit to the community. And, he was, better. I mean, he was functioning in a good way. And he told me, he said, and Melvin says, in a couple more years, I can become a drug and alcohol counselor. So I don't know how many people are willing to take someone home like that. Not many, I suppose. But it all worked out for everyone involved. And it was a teaching for me in that community can heal almost anything. And I think that's a thread for sure that runs through Coyote Healing. So then Coyote Wisdom is about my learning to tell stories for healing. And so I'm more of the protagonist of the book, as opposed to elders that I've known who were telling stories. So by the time of that book, I moved into a role of storytelling and lots of stories. And, um, my sort of rule of thumb was to try and find a story from anyone's culture, whatever culture you come from. I try and tell a story from that culture that would connect you to your culture and also inspire you, to maybe look into your culture more because I found that for the most part, the people who came to see me who were indigenous were not connected to their culture, for any reason, number of reasons, adoption, urban migration, residential schooling, um, just the great diaspora that happened for everyone in the 50s and the 60s. People spread all over the country all of a sudden. I think it started in the late 50s, exploded in the 60s. So, so it was my goal to kind of give people their culture back if I could. And so I learned lots of stories. During part of that time, I was working in Hawaii, so I learned some native Hawaiian stories from some of the locals and um, learned some Russian stories. Had some Russian clients that came out of the woodwork. And so I can say, "Я говорю немного по-русски." I don't speak very much Russian. So, although maybe these days we'll all have to learn Russian, I don't know. That's a whole other topic. Um, so that was Coyote Wisdom. It was really about my joy, the joy I found in telling stories and in people's reactions to those stories, and also how to tell a good story, how to get people's attention and hold people's attention, and what worked.
We're all elevated.
We're at a hospital right now. That's a rare time that a voice will come in. So everybody at home, don't worry about it. No need to evacuate or clear any halls at home. You're at home.
Oh, right. And our code blues are never real code blues. So I'm not even going to think about it.
Before I ask about Coyote spirit, healing, wisdom, medicine, the connection to earth, the connection to all there is, I just wanted to cover something that's a higher, even higher vibe, if that's possible, which is joy or love. It's a constant. It never went away. It's in us, it's around us. It's the John Lennon reference. But can you say it a different way or touch upon it one more time before we go back to the concept of coyote?
Yeah, I think joy is celebrating with gratitude what we have, where we are. There's a word in Lakota, wopile, which means that celebrate with gratitude. See, that's what I say. They call it and they cancel it. That's
They
why I
can't
didn't.
cancel joy, and that's where we're at right now.
That's right. They can't cancel joy. They can cancel code blue, but they can't cancel joy. And really, no one can take joy away from you. And it's there to discover. And it can be in really small moments. And it can spring up in a interaction with a suicidal teenager even. And this weekend I'm working on the uh, adolescent psychiatric unit, and I've had a couple moments of joy jumping out, and the person with me laughing and just being a little bit lighter for a moment, and that's really great. And I think we have to think about what gives us joy, and I've certainly thought about that for myself. Um, I like flying in airplanes. That gives me joy. So I like traveling to places, and I like um, I like walking. I like going to museums. That gives me joy, and I like watching plays. I like going to the gym and beating my previous record. That gives me joy. I like eating oysters. That gives me joy, especially the ones from Maine. Maine oysters are the best. And if you get a chance, Damariscotta are the best oysters from Maine. So, so I like playing the piano, gives me joy. Um, all kinds of little things are full of joy. And writing an essay gives me joy, writing a poem, um, talking to a friend, walking in the forest. There's countless things that give us joy. I think probably the difficulty is people forget to notice when they're having joy, that it passes by quickly. The moments of joy can pass quickly and you don't even notice. And that's really what's sad about our modern lifestyle. It's so full of distractions and demands that it's hard to notice the slow stuff that's traveling beneath the waves, so to speak.
And the concept of coyote spirit medicine healing, could you share with us that?
Yeah. So once upon a time, when I was looking for an ally, I wanted an eagle, a bear, a salmon, a wolf, and those damn coyotes kept following me around everywhere I went and leaving poop on the hood of my car and paw prints and just howling outside my window. I remember I went to a friend's house in Topanga Canyon, California, and there were there was a concert. The coyotes gave a concert, little coyotes, big coyotes. And in the morning, my friend said, they never do that. What did you do? How did you get them to do that? And I said, they just follow me around. What can I say? And I've had many iterations on the notion of coyote. And when I first began, for me, coyote was someone who lived in two worlds, of the indigenous world and the non-indigenous world. And slowly but surely, I discovered that there are many other meanings to coyote, some positive and some negative. But coyote is a good-natured trickster. Coyote doesn't always have your best interests at heart, but he doesn't necessarily want to hurt you either. Unlike Itomi or Spider-Man, who would just as soon cause you misery. Coyote is a good-hearted trickster, I think. And I just finished doing a workshop with a couple friends of mine, and we called it March Madness. And besides being inspired by the insanity of basketball in the month of March, it was inspired by an art exhibit in a French museum about fools and art from medieval times, from pre-Renaissance, from Renaissance times. And the fool has been with us forever. And the fool, interestingly, is the only character who can make fun of the king and not have his head cut off. So fools play a really important role in the world. And I've been foolish enough to make fun of power enough times to have to run to another state eventually. Have to, flee, so to speak. Not literally, but figuratively. And so, I feel like Coyote is on duty when Coyote points out the emperor is naked. And somebody has to. Um, so I think Coyote is desperately needed right now in the US Congress. I hope a few Coyotes get the courage to find their way there. But so Coyote is a happy fellow for the most part, except when he's eaten alive by his pups because he forgot to change back from being a rabbit to being a coyote. That happened once. But Coyote he seems to always reappear. It gets hard. You can't kill him off very readily. He's always back, no matter what terrible thing happened to him in the previous story. I think the Hopis tell the most gruesome coyote stories in the world. He's always getting torn limb from limb in those Hopi stories. But so, I guess I identify as a kind of stumbling, buffoonish, sometimes tricky, sometimes just plain old confused character who wants everyone to have a good time and to celebrate with joy. And, don't forget to eat the oysters.
If you could talk to your younger self now, and we're talking back during either your Stanford times or psychiatry studies or butting heads with established administrations of a hospital, psychiatry ward, wherever, what would you want to say? What would you want to do differently, if anything? Maybe not at all, because it was your path and it was unique to you. But what advice would you have for the younger you?
I would say don't take any of this all that seriously. And, if you want to go ahead and poke the bear, but don't expect the bear not to fight back. And and while you're doing that, while you're poking the bear, have some fun, and remember that someday you'll be old and you can't take any of it with you when you go. And probably what you take with you is the love that you've shared, and the people you've shared it with. And that's probably more important than writing a paper or writing a book or finishing a research study, any of that. Though all of that is fun. I mean, so I wouldn't say don't do it, but don't do it with such seriousness, and find a little joy in the cracks. Let the light shine in.
Amazing. And speaking of amazing, there's another amazing figure on the whole, I don't know what to call it, healer, spirituality, wisdom landscape in the last 50 years in America. He's passed over, but Dr. Karl Hammerschlag, so physician, psychiatry, Arizona, I'm going to guess it was 3 to 4 years ago. Can you say a few words about him for us, because you knew him? And he had two books in particular. The first one was Dancing Healers, which is just beautiful. One chapter leaves you in tears. The next chapter, you might be laughing, tears again, laughter, and so on. Many stories in that book. And he had a very interesting journey that I think is as rich as yours. And there was one more thing about him. Oh, he hung out with Patch Adams, I believe. They did a lot of not taking things so seriously, especially themselves, dressing funny, from everything from the clown noses to everything else. They believed humor and laughter was very important. What could you share with us about Karl Hammerschlag?
Carl was a great guy, and he was really funny. He never missed an opportunity to tell a good joke or to tell a good story. And he had a lot of good stories. But I think what I admired most about Carl was his serious work on the Indian Child Welfare Act. and bringing people's awareness to what was happening to Indigenous babies and children in terms of being taken away from families, being taken away from reservations, being placed with non-Indigenous families for economic reasons. And Carl really led the charge on getting the Indian Child Welfare Act passed, accomplished, testified to Congress. He was ein wirklicher Mensch, as one might say, in the words of him, of Carl. And, so he was just great fun. And he always served a wonderful dinner too. So you couldn't fail to eat well when you visited Carl. That's for sure.
If people have read, I think it was Dancing Healers, there's a moment where a ceremony's been prepared. I don't think he's bought into the concept beyond traditional American style healing, in other words, medicine. And I think he's sitting in a dark setup, wooden structure, maybe half in the ground. And it's, Native American, I'm going to lose all my English here. Native American ceremony, but pitch black. And there is a rattle involved. Now, while the person leading, the healer is leading the ceremony, the rattle somehow, the universe came over and thumped him on the forehead. And it was a big wake-up call. The universe saying, hey, this is legit. Pay attention. Your brain's not going to fathom it. You've had many of those ceremonies in the past where you were still going along the curve. Not that we're all not still learning today, but can you share with us something similar where you were in a healing ceremony and something that to this date you cannot explain, but it was pivotal for you to allow for more embracing all that already is in and around you?
Well, I think probably the most mysterious ceremonies that I've been in are the Uwiki ceremonies. And they all blend together now to some degree, but there's some memories that stand out. I can remember being thumped on the head with a rattle, with a drumstick. I can remember having water tossed on me. I can remember small furry things running across my lap. I think the most amazing thing is when the lights come on and the leader is untied. And I've always wondered how they do that. There was one Iwipi in which the leader actually was on the other side of a locked door when the lights came on. He wasn't even in the room, and the door was locked from the other side. And the guy whose house it was had to let him in with the key. So go figure that one. It reminds me, there's a wonderful book by Vine Deloria Jr. It was the last book that he wrote, and it was called The Way We Used to Be, or something like that. And he talked about a Blackfoot concept that matter is frozen thought, and that all you have to do to mess with matter is to thaw the thought and then refreeze it. And I thought, well, that's what those Iwipi guys are doing. They're like, messing with matter. They're thawing it. And golly, wouldn't it be great to be able to do that? But I never, part of being, I suppose, a person in both worlds is maybe you never go deep enough into either world to get to the really incredible mysteries, like how to thaw thought, how to thaw matter. I don't really know how to do that, but I do know I was at a ceremony in eastern Washington state, and I noticed that the mountains kept moving around. And I said to one of the locals, Hey, those mountains keep moving around. And he said, yeah, they do that. He said, I wouldn't rely on them for any sense of direction. And I said, oh, I said, how come they do that? He said, I don't know, because they want to, I guess. And that was that. Um, and so, um, so I've seen matter move. And we were in the Gulf of California in a ceremony with some Seri people. And the same thing happened with some islands out in the water that they were moving around. And the other really crazy thing that happened is this Seri woman who was leading the ceremony had bird medicine. And there were like 50 birds lined up in a row in front of us on the beach. And they were all different species. There were like pelicans and booby birds and cormorants and all kinds of different birds, sandpipers. And there they were, sort of equidistant from each other, all in a line, facing her. And I was there with a friend from Anchorage, Alaska. And I saw him a few years ago. And the first thing he said to me, he said, remember those birds? He said, you don't see that every day. And you don't.
If it's comfortable as a topic, helpers, unconditional love figures, white buffalo calf woman, a particular figure over here, a particular figure over there. Is there one you could share or talk about?
I think there's countless loving helpers, and not all of them share their names with us. Some of them are just nameless angels who happen to walk by. And I used to like to go to midnight mass on Christmas Eve just to see the angels show up, And I remember once I was in this really adobe church in New Mexico, and there was this. I was sitting in the back, and this angel appeared, and I was just like blown away. It was just like, wow, just the quality of love was just immense, and the message I got was, if we gave you all that we have to give, you would incinerate. So we have to be careful with you guys. And I went, well, that's nice of you. I don't want to incinerate. Like that spontaneous combustion episode of Mulder and Scully. So I think it's us. C.S. Lewis talked about that in, I think the book is Out of the Silent Planet. And what C.S. Lewis said is that everywhere in the solar system is in song except for us. We're the ones who aren't hearing the music. And all you have to do is hear the music, and it's there. And that certainly happened to me. I've lost track of the music at various times in my life, and get a wake-up call and have to come back and listen. And so I think we don't need sort of famous healing, helping spirits. It's nice when they show up, like White Buffalo Calf Woman, Mary Magdalene, or the Virgin of Guadalupe. It's great when they appear, but there's lots of nameless angels that are just as good, I think, who can pop in. One of the great things when I lived in Tucson was the locals reporting sightings of the Virgin Mary on various structures like barns and, movie theaters, outdoor movie theaters. And the bishop in Phoenix said, "The Virgin Mary doesn't appear anymore." And um, I said to my friends, he just doesn't know enough Mexicans.
If you could, have you had an experience? This will be the last experiential question, I think. Have you had a moment where you've run into a human, but shiny eyes, and afterwards you had to shake your head, or all these decades later, you're still like, whoa, that was a moment. It could have been an angel, it could have been another figure, it might have been spoken words, just a few, what you needed to hear. You turned around and they were gone 6 seconds later, or it was unspoken. It was just the look of knowing, and you, whoop, whatever you needed to let go of was let go of, or something else. Sometimes it's a flat tire and a stranger comes along. Others, it's an engine that needed repairing, but they weren't wearing gloves. I had a woman in the US Virgin Islands who went the India route of study, and she had two gentlemen, but they weren't using gloves. They were touching red hot radiator, helping her at night to get the water back in her car. But she noticed that, and she knew they weren't human. So, do you have one of those that you can share? It's okay if not, but if you do,
And I wrote about one in Coyote Medicine where it was a time when I was really sad, and I walked out to the end of the Berkeley Pier, which goes out a fair distance into the bay. It's not, must be a couple 100 meters or maybe more out into the bay. And I was sitting at the end of the Berkeley Pier, just looking over at San Francisco. And a guy comes up and sits down next to me. And we start having a conversation. And it was really fun. He's kind of really funny and nice. And he says, "Oh, you look kind of sad. Why not? I just thought I'd come sit with you for a bit and see if we could, you know." It was a gray day. I mean, it was one of those summers in San Francisco, where the fog comes in at 3 and surrounds everything in Berkeley and San Francisco. And anyway, I felt incredibly better. So I paused for a couple seconds, 2 or 3, I don't know. And then I turned to look for him, and he wasn't there. He was absent.
Uh,
And I thought, hmm.
incredible. Okay,
Yeah.
before we start wrapping it up, Hawaii. What's your take on Hawaii? Did you love it during your time there? And can you share something with the classic Lewis Mehl-Madrona take or perspective that we wouldn't have known otherwise about Hawaii, your time there, or something else?
Well,
Aloha.
I love the land and I love the ocean. And I feel the terrible pain that the indigenous people there feel at having had their land stolen from underneath them. And I think Hawaii is a there's conflicting emotion for me because of that, because there's so many Native Hawaiians who are camping on the beach because they can't afford to live anywhere, and so many non-Indigenous people who own skyscrapers, and so um, the sadness is intense, and the anger is intense, and I've had some amazing experiences with Indigenous healers there, with Lomi Lomi, the real Lomi Lomi and not the tourist Lomi Lomi, and storytellers and people of wisdom. And so I love Hawaii, and it makes me sad. And I used to live there, and I probably still would if I hadn't fallen in love with someone. So I had to move back east, as people do when they fall in love. But I still I think where I really love to go are the places where um, it's not so built up and you can feel um, the power of the land and the water and watch the whales and the dolphins. And um, I think probably my favorite place are the volcano fields on Kona, Kailua area. Just that raw power that you see as it must have been when it flowed down from the mountain, from the volcano. And it's, still pretty hard rock, volcanic rock. And I'm sure there's some other cool volcanoes in the world, like Iceland, but I've never been there. I've always wanted to take the helicopter up to the top and see it from, like, see the hot lava coming down. But every time I go, the price has gone up. And I think, oh, well, maybe I'll afford it next trip. But that's probably a mistake. I should probably just do it, you know, see that hot lava once and for all.
In a second, I'm going to ask, uh, as part of the closing, you'll still be able to remind us of something else. Um, but if you could give us in a moment, I'll light some sage with your permission, blow it your way in Maine from Texas, if that's okay. And I'm going to buy you time with this because I'd love for you to give us a mantra, whether you're a guru out of India or it's just the best phrase. And it can't be the John Lennon one, okay? But it could still use love. Anything you want to remind us of, a short phrase, but if you don't mind saying it 3 times from your heart, so people who are really taking the time to listen here, to pay attention, to use their awareness, they can feel you talking. You'll say it 3 times, but I'm going to buy time while you decide what that is. I'm going to light a little bit of sage. People at home, if you haven't done this or you have done this, I sometimes forget, but we've done it on a lot of shows. It's just sage from California. Give yourself permission to let go, catch a little sage. If you want to go crazy, why not ask for flowers, ocean, Hawaii? Love Hawaii. Just love and above. You don't have to have any sadness. And here's the sage. And there we go. And you're getting a little there?
Yeah, for sure.
I didn't do it. Blame angels, blame the universe, White Buffalo Calf Woman, the whole crew. Don't blame Canada. Okay, I'm going to snub this out. And then, Lewis, you've been fantastic. What a charm, what a treat, what a delight. And thank you for being here to say it. If I didn't say it earlier, thank you for being here. What is it that would be your words of wisdom from the heart to everyone else's heart out there? But if you don't mind saying it 3 times, I've only had about 20 guests do this, but boy, when they go from the heart and say it 3 times, I think people get something more than the words themselves. They're getting the love. So what is it that you want to share from the heart to all of us 3 times?
Cultivate moments of joy whenever possible. Cultivate moments of joy whenever possible. Cultivate moments of joy whenever possible.
Well, Lewis Mehl-Madrona, you are a wonderful guest. I look forward to having you on again. I think it's 2026 sometime, and we'll figure out the taping date. I hope you'll come back on and join us again.
I hope we're both still here.
Hopefully. Thank you again, Lewis. What a treat. I hope the rest of your day is phenomenal in the best of ways, and for the rest of the month and year and beyond.
Thank you very much.